So when you think of Charles Dickens, maybe you're picturing cozy Christmases, maybe some London orphans. Well, I want you to forget all of that. Because with A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens just throws us right into a raging inferno. This is not London fog, this is the smoke from a society literally burning itself to the ground. We're about to dive into a time of just shocking contradictions, a violent, bloody revolution, and what might be one of the most powerful acts of sacrifice in all of literature.
Look, these have to be some of the most famous opening lines ever written, and there's a really good reason for that. This isn't just Dickens being poetic. This is the absolute core truth of the entire story. He's telling us from the very first sentence, hey, you are entering a world that is completely ripped in two. It's a society at war with itself, where for every good thing, there's an equally terrible thing right next to it. This idea of duality, of two extremes, it's going to haunt every single page. And believe me, nowhere was that division more obvious than in pre-revolutionary France. The country wasn't just divided, it was a powder keg, and the fuse was getting dangerously short. On one side, you had a level of luxury that is just unimaginable, and on the other, a kind of poverty and starvation that's honestly hard to even wrap your head around today.
I mean, just look at this. The sheer arrogance versus the raw desperation. It's staggering. The aristocrats, the Monsignors, they literally thought the entire world was made for their pleasure. They were living in a fancy ball that was never to leave off, just dripping in silk and gold. And then you have St. Antoine, where the only thing on the menu, day in and day out, was hunger. It was written on the walls. You could see it in the people's eyes. The contrast is, well, it's absolutely shocking.
So Dickens gives us this scene, and it is just one of the most powerful and, frankly, disturbing bits of foreshadowing I have ever read. It all starts with a simple accident, right? A big barrel of wine breaks open in the street. But what happens next? Oh man, it's a dark prophecy for the future of France. People just stop everything they're doing. They get down on their knees in the mud and start lapping up spilled wine from the filthy cobblestones. They're squeezing it out of rags into their babies' mouths. It's this desperate, almost animal-like thirst. A hunger so deep that any drop of something, anything, no matter how dirty, feels like a gift. It's genuinely horrifying to picture. And that's when it hits you. Dickens isn't really talking about wine here, is he? That red stain on the street? It's a symbol. The thirst these people have isn't going to be satisfied by wine for long. Soon, it's going to be a thirst for revenge, a thirst for blood, and the streets are going to be stained a much, much deeper shade of red. So that thirst for blood, it doesn't just go away. It builds and builds until it explodes into the reign of terror. Once the revolution is unleashed, it creates a fury that gets personified by one terrifying new symbol, an invention that would become this grotesque icon for the new republic.
This is what's so mind-boggling to me. They didn't see the guillotine as just an execution device. No, it was twisted into this bizarre, almost religious symbol. They called it a sign of regeneration. People started wearing tiny models of it around their necks, replacing the cross. They literally deified an instrument of death, thinking it was somehow going to cleanse the entire nation.
And the efficiency of it was, well, it was inhuman. 22 people executed in 22 minutes. I mean, think about that. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was a production line of death. The sheer scale and the speed of the slaughter is just, it's almost impossible to comprehend. And it became a daily show. And to cope, to normalize this daily horror show, Parisians came up with the darkest gallows humor you can possibly imagine. I am just aghast reading these. The guillotine was the best cure for a headache. It was the national razor, which shaved close. And they called the moment of death sneezing into the sack. It just shows you how deeply this brutality was woven into the fabric of everyday life, how people had to make these awful jokes just to survive the psychological trauma.
After a night of mob violence, where the revolutionaries were literally sharpening their bloody weapons on a public grindstone, this is the image Dickens leaves us with. It's a permanent stain, not just blood that you can wash away, but this deep, unnatural red that has scarred the very soul of the nation, a stain that even the sun itself could never, ever erase.
But amidst all this epic, nationwide chaos, Dickens does something totally brilliant. He zooms the camera all the way in on an intensely personal story, and it revolves around two men who are physically almost identical, but in their souls, well, they couldn't be more different. The novel's whole theme of duality made real.
So, on one side, you have Charles Darnay. He's your classic hero, right? Noble, principled, everybody loves him.
He's an aristocrat who's so disgusted by his own family's evil that he completely walks away from it. And then you have Sydney Carton, a brilliant lawyer, but he's also a cynical alcoholic who thinks he's completely worthless. He calls himself a jackal. You see, Darnay has everything to live for, while Carton is convinced he has absolutely nothing.
So, when Darnay, through a horrible twist of fate, gets condemned to the guillotine, Carton sees his one single chance. It's a chance not just to save the man that the woman he loves, but to give his own wasted life a single, profound moment of meaning, a kind of resurrection. And he's going to do it by using the one thing he and Darnay share, his face.
So as Carton is walking to the scaffold, in Darnay's place, he's not even thinking about himself. He holds the hand of this terrified young seamstress who's also been condemned, and he comforts her by saying these words. In his final moments, this cynical, broken man becomes this source of incredible strength and grace for a complete stranger. It's just incredible.
And in that one act, he finds the peace that he could never find his entire life. The man who was always agitated, always drowning his sorrows, finally looks serene. He achieved in death the purpose and the dignity that he could never, ever find in life. It's such a stunning and heartbreaking transformation.
These are Carton's final thoughts as he faces the blade. It's the ultimate recognition that this one act of love, of pure sacrifice, outweighs an entire lifetime of regret. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful and moving endings in all of fiction.
So after all of that, what are we supposed to make of Sydney Carton? I mean, his life was, by his own admission, a total waste. He was selfish, he was drunk, he was miserable. But his death was arguably one of the most heroic acts of love you can even imagine, which brings us to the final, lingering question at the very heart of this novel.
Does that final selfless sacrifice just wash away all the years of squandered potential? Do we call him a hero for what he did at the very end, or is he a tragic figure for what he failed to do until then? Dickens doesn't give us an easy answer, and that's exactly why this book remains a masterpiece. It forces us to ask ourselves what a life is truly worth.